All right, we're going to get rolling. So one more time, VVox application as on the screen. We will utilize this in the presentation for live polling. If you wouldn't mind taking a screenshot, a picture of that QR code, pulling it up, we will answer or ask and have the answers presented throughout the presentation. Use the comment section here, as Francesca's mentioning, use the comment section here within StreamYard to ask our questions versus the application on the phone. With that, Carl, we'll go to the next slide. Great. So welcome to TechPulse. This is our virtual series. If you've been following along with Integris, you've seen our Inspire series that we've been doing in person across the country. We also wanted to provide a virtual version of that to folks all across the country. So if you haven't been to an Inspire in person, you can check out our website at integrisit.com/inspire. You could actually see Paul and I in person and shake our hands along with a lot of other folks. Today we're breaking up the virtual session into different sections, and today we will be touching on our concept or our framework of responsible IT architecture. And Paul's going to touch on the cybersecurity insurance marketplace and what everyone should be proactively thinking about there. With that, let's get into the presentation. So just a quick overview of who Integris is. Currently, we are 25 plus locations. We've come together over the last 3 years with a group of peer group members in the MSP space to bring together the best-in-class providers to service customers nationwide. We're specifically focused on managed IT, cybersecurity, and compliance work across the country. Next slide. I'm a visual guy, so you're going to see some visual pictures today. This is a look at our coverage across the U.S. as we continue to expand. A lot of organizations or people will ask us, why are we doing what we're doing? And to me, this slide articulates that very well. So a lot of the managed service providers that we know and are in our network have really, really good talent. And we wanted to take that talent and be able to create very specific business units. We call them practices that can specifically help our customers. So on the left-hand side, you have network services. This works really well, or this group is formulated for organizations with multi-locations, 20, 30 plus locations across the United States. This group is meant to help them get connectivity at the scale they need it. Down the middle is cloud services, whether it's private cloud, public cloud. What is the needs of an organization and the dedication to designing the right solution for the customer. Then project services, a lot of the MSPs in the space will have a project group. We specifically took that to the next level with a project management office, project managers, project coordinators to really give that next level of service on the project side. And then finally, which is the hot topic over the last 2 years now, is compliance. How does technology, IT, cybersecurity, and now compliance all come together? We have a dedicated group of chief information security officers that services our clients in all different types of regulated industries, states across the country. Next slide. Quick little housekeeping. So in the VVox app that you guys scan the QR code, there is a link for an attachment that is called the Responsible IT Architecture Scorecard. You are free to download that and use it to your abilities and complete this as we walk through it together. This also gives you guys a document that you can use internally at your organization to understand where do you all stand on this framework that we're going to walk through today. So with all of that, let's get into the meat of the presentation, responsible IT architecture. With our first polling question, how would you rate your overall understanding of today's cybersecurity threats and the layers of defense you have in place to defend? There we go. I see 13 responses. Give it another second. All right, let's see those results. Here they come. There we go. Wow, this presentation's high, Paul. We're up at the 4s. We do have some 2s and 3s as well. Well, I appreciate you guys doing that. We got one more question for you here before we get into the meat of it. What are some of the topics that concern you surrounding today's cybersecurity threats? So in this polling question, you guys can physically write in as many words or topics that concern you, and it'll formulate on the screen as a word cloud with a pretty cool graphic. So if you wouldn't mind going back to that Vivox app on your phone, throwing in some topics in there that concern you, that you want us to touch on today, especially the folks that were fours. Love to understand, kind of what's the next level for you guys with a really good understanding. And for the folks that were down in that 2 to 3 range, what are some of the topics that may be ambiguous to you or you would like more understanding of? Give it another minute here. Awesome. All right, let's get after it. Let's see those results. All right, what do we got? Education, phishing, data security, hackers, visibility. That's a good one. New threats and customer data breaches. Very good. We got AI on there as well. Horizontal. I see that. Paul and I, in our pre-call, we're talking about all of the CrowdStrike conversation that's affected a lot of the world over the last 2 weeks. So I'm sure that'll come up in our conversation today as well, and maybe a hot topic for all of you. With that, let's get into the presentation. So let's start with why and how did Integris come up with responsible IT architecture? So the basis of this for Integris came from dealing with clients in all different types of industries, all different types of states. Some of them are public organizations. Some of them are nonprofits. Some of them deal with a significant, I think I saw a law firm. We have a Minnesota law firm in here, I see. A significant amount of downstream compliance from their clients, meaning vendor risk assessments that they have to fill out. Then also we have Paul on here for a very specific reason. Cyber insurance started demanding certain standards of all of our clients as well. So Integris as an MSP, seeing all of this information and all the requests from our clients and what they needed to comply with, put together a very basic understanding framework of, hey, I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care what state you're in. Don't care what size you are. Don't care if you're in office or virtual. What is the base foundation that you should have in place no matter who you are? And how can we start articulating that to our current client base as well as our prospective client base just to make everybody better and protect small to medium-sized businesses across the country? With that, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is our I'm more of a visual learner here. So this ties very well into the downloadable PDF that we're providing you on that scorecard. I'm going to walk all of you through it now. And if you want, you can ask any questions within the comments section in the chat, specifically here in the presentation, to ask questions that we can answer. So I start up in the top left there on your network firewall. Doesn't matter if you're in a physical location or you're in a cloud space, your servers are in a cloud, public or private infrastructure. Very specifically, how I think of this as the edge of the network. How are we protecting and monitoring the traffic that is coming into the organization, as well as the traffic your employees going out through the organization? A lot of times what we find in the technology assessments we do of new environments that we're walking into is they have the right device in place. They bought the brand name. They listened to the recommendations of a provider or an internal resource, but the configurations, the settings, and the licensing are not set up properly to take full benefit of what that solution can actually do for them. So that's what we look at as a network firewall is not only do we have it, a lot of times people check that box, but it's what is the actual configurations? Is everything enabled? And then does that work with the environment to make sure that we're productive, but we're also secure at the same time? And a lot of things we do in the IT and cybersecurity space is balancing act between productivity as well as security and making sure we're balancing that out. With that, I'm going to move on to number 2 on here, which is backup and disaster recovery. We call this business continuity and disaster recovery. What I really like to touch on here, and Paul's also going to touch on in his presentation, around cyber insurance and some of the critical coverages that tie into this is what is called RTO and RPO. So recovery point objective is RPO and recovery time objective. In order to keep the conversation high level and short, recovery point objective in its most simplest form is if I go down, how much, or if I have an incident, how much data or work am I going to lose? That's number one. So you can think about that. If I was going down today, how much data and work am I going to lose from my company, my employees? There's different standards in the marketplace. Sometimes people back up once a day, once an hour. There's all different types of standards, but you want to know the answer to that question. If we were to have an incident today, how much data and work would we lose? A lot of times people will tell us what they believe it to be. When we do those assessments, they come out and we find they haven't actually backed up a critical server in 6+ months. So sometimes the reality is different than what we're told or what a customer is being told. So you want to be really locked in on what the answer for your organization needs to be, as well as testing that that is actually true. On the other side of this conversation is RTO, recovery time objective. And in its most basic form, it's if I have an incident, how long is it going to take me to get back up and running? Once again, if I have an incident, how long is it going to take me to get back up and running? Recovery time objective, or RTO. Now, one way to think about this is for your overall organization from a very high level. It's going to take us 6 hours to get back up and running, whatever the answer may be. The other way to look at this on the next level down is I should look at all of my critical line of business applications, my phone system, email, financial package, CRM system, right? You can break this down in multiple different ways and ask the same question for each solution. For instance, using Integris as an example, if our phone system was to go down, that's a critical application for our business. We handle a significant amount of calls every single day to help our customers. We have a 0-minute RTO on our phone system. It cannot go down. If it goes down, we need a failover immediately. But take Integris on another application, we use Sage Intacct as our financial backend. That could go down. And yes, it would cause some pain, but it's not going to stop us from servicing our customers. So we have a different RTO for that application. Just trying to give you all some good thoughts or food for thought, things to think about when you're talking about this from your organization. Whether you're internal IT or you're an executive, you can all have this conversation. A lot of times we find that IT, whether it's external or internal, is on a different page than the executive leadership team is, meaning they're thinking about these two things differently, or there's two different answers to those questions. So you want to really use this as an exercise to get everybody on the same page. And, just like I went through our applications, do that with your teams as well.
Anthony.
All right. Yes, sir.
Jump in a quick second. I think this one's really critical. We certainly on the insurance side look at this. The carriers that offer the insurance policies want to know how long are you going to take to get back to doing business, because the time that you're down is costing them. They're having to pay you for that. And this, I see many potential clients who have either a disconnect like you described of, well, I thought we could be up in a couple hours. Oh no, boss, we've never tried that. Or I see a perspective of, well, what's the harm? Which systems need to be included? And just kind of a disconnect of, well, what is actually mission critical and what could we survive with, right? And so I think this one, for those who maybe aren't involved in the IT aspects, this is one you definitely want to be having that internal conversation well before you're, facing buying a cyber policy or making IT investment decisions, you want to make sure you understand this. This is really, really critical.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's a great way to think about it and even articulate to your insurance broker and insurance carrier, we know what's critical to our business and we have responses. The confidence that that gives your underwriter, I'm assuming versus the standard of responses they're getting, probably sets you up for some success there as
Right.
well.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm gonna move a little bit faster here for the next couple. So items 3 through 6, Integris really looked at this because this was formed throughout the COVID period as, you know what? We used to all be in offices primarily, and we're really protected physically when we went into that office space. I was plugged into the offices or the businesses network, right? I was in their four walls. What Integris looked at is post COVID was we really need to figure out how to protect a user, an employee, and a workstation, a laptop, no matter where they are in the world. That's where 3 through 6 really come in, is now users and workstations are actually outside of the office, probably 90% of the time than they are in the office. A version or an analogy I like to use in this space is the banking space. Um, Banks used to spend a significant amount of money protecting each local branch and the safe that was in that branch. Then their world changed, right? They moved to online banking. And now the actual branch location may have $10,000 in it. I'm making up numbers, I'm being dramatic, but my mom was in the banking space for a while. If there's just really not that much money in the safes anymore. They have to do special orders if you want a large amount of cash. Now all of their money has moved to protecting the online banking system and making sure that their users and their customers are protected there from funds transfer and all this kind of fraud that's going on there. Similar to all of our business and how we've needed to evolve based on our employees and where they work. So 3 through 6 are additional layers that protect either the user or the workstation, no matter where they are in the world. A lot of these items are now mandatory from the insurance carriers that Paul is working with. Then we go to 7, 8, and 9. So number 7, least privileged access is more of a concept. It's not a tool. It needs to be enabled at an organization. And depending on how well built out this is, depends on your operational maturity of your organization. What in its simplest form, what we like to say is Anthony needs access as an employee of Integris to only the systems I need access to do my job and nothing more. I don't need access to Sage Intacct. I don't play around in Sage Intacct. What we find at a lot of organizations is that Anthony would have access to everything. Anthony, as an employee, may not know that they have access to everything, but the technology, the infrastructure, the systems are set up that I could. So when Integris talks about this, we want to make sure that if Anthony had an incident, Anthony was breached from a user perspective, that the threat actor, the criminal, could only get access to what Anthony had access to. So we're really trying to limit the damage that one person can make. If you take that model and you bring it out across all employees, you can see how we can really sandbox an issue to a limited exposure if done correctly. The reality is that most organizations are pretty wide open, and people, if they know how to do it, can really get around the organization and could expose significant amounts of damage to that organization based on the access that they have. As we go forward, Integris is doing a couple presentations on Copilot and AI. The next level of this is going to be based on the actual files and folders within your database, in your systems, in SharePoint, wherever you save your stuff. Meaning Anthony is going to specifically have to tag documentation on where and who should be able to see this. The reason for that is with these new AI systems, Copilot included, if I have that enabled, I can now start to ask all different types of questions based on the documentation in my organization. And if I have access to all of that documentation, whether I know it or not, I can start to ask some really inquisitive questions that may give me data I shouldn't have access to. The most common use case is, what does the CEO get paid? Right? If it has access to the payroll and the different HR documentations and everything is wide open, those are the types of questions internally that can get us in trouble. Let's move on to number 8. Number 8 is effective patching. So specifically with patching, I like to call this free security. My engineering team hates when I call it free security, but really what it is all of these systems, Mac, Apple, Windows, Microsoft, all these things are constantly releasing updates, usually on a monthly cadence, sometimes in emergency situations, to make sure that our systems are up to date. I like to say in its most basic form, if somebody's throwing a patch at you, I like to just think of it as, for myself, as this: there was some sort of security hole they found and they're trying to get my system patched. Obviously, that's not always the case with the technical folks in the room, but that's the way I mentally think about patches and updates there. A lot of times we go into environments, and I'm sure Paul has seen this as well, is these systems are just so out of date. Maybe they haven't done the patch because if they do the patch, it'll cause issues with the system. That's sometimes a big key. But how do we work through what we call patch compliance and then work with either the internal team, the external team to say, hey, we either got to remove these systems from the network and get them off, or we got to figure out how to get to them physically and get them up to the date that we need them to be. And then finally, hardware, software, lifecycle management. This is usually one of the bigger vulnerabilities that people don't typically spend the time to think about. These are older systems, making sure that our systems are constantly up to date, servers, workstations, so that we are I like to think of this as preventing downtime. It also prevents cybersecurity risk from old 2003, 2008 servers that are just no longer supported by where they came from. So how are we staying ahead of the curve on this stuff? At the end of the day, this is responsible IT architecture framework. We call it a framework specifically because it will evolve over time. This will continue to change. Paul in the insurance world may come to us as IT providers or to our client base and say, hey, MFA is no longer the only thing that's needed. Maybe you have to have 24/7 managed detection and response. I could see that coming down the pipe in the future. When? I don't know. But that's why we laid this out as a framework, so it could evolve over time. And also it could be applied to any organization. They could look at this, understand it, and then go and try and implement it into their businesses. That was a lot to consume. Please, any questions, please put them in the comments. I know we have a couple on here. I'm going to keep the presentation moving, and Paul and I will either address them during or after. I want to make sure I give Paul enough time to go through his stuff because it's really important. Next slide, please. A lot of folks said, hey, when you came together, we had all different, I like to say the managed IT space sounds like one industry and everybody's doing the same thing. The reality is everyone has their own flavor of what that looks like. Integris took the best of breed, put them together, and then said, how do we create a managed services offering that applies to everyone as best in class? We talk about this or call it the empowered approach. And the visual here is on the right-hand side. It is the flywheel concept. Why is it a flywheel? Because each of these departments on the wheel need to be doing their job, working effectively, and handling their tasks so that IT is running smoothly, effectively, and is secure. Do a quick, brief explanation of this flywheel for you all. The top left is service desk. A lot of people come to us for this world. I like to call it the emergency room. In a medical analogy, we want to have the best emergency room in the game, but we do not want to spend all of our time there. It's not the right way to deliver medical care. It's also not the right way to deliver the best IT support. Over on the right, IT systems, a lot of what we just talked about in responsible IT architecture lives in this bucket, making sure that we are reacting to all of the alerts, that the systems and tools we put in place for you all are actually getting worked on and solved. Down in the lower right is a dedicated IT team specifically to you and your industry and your knowledge, making sure that there is somebody being held responsible for the documentation, configurations, line of business apps in your environment, and that we know how you guys all run. And then in the bottom left, I like to say this is where IT gets fun. From that CIO level perspective of what are we strategizing for? What are we budgeting for? How can we better use technology to help your employees, to help your customers, and to grow your business? That's how we think about that.
Excellent. Excellent. Let's jump right in. I think we've got a question here we wanted to tee up. We go to the next slide. Yeah, so we can skip along here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our business after you take this poll question. But does your organization have a cyber insurance policy in place? That's the question here. I talked to last week 2 companies that did not, that were sizable, $30 million, and several others that did have a policy in place, but didn't actually know what was in it. So, and that's fairly common. So of our group here, how many have a cyber insurance policy in place? Let's see.
Looks like we got a little misstep there on the poll. If you guys wouldn't mind just throwing that in the comments here in the thing. As Paul moves on, I'll be looking at them to see how many of you guys have a policy in place and how many do not.
Yeah. Okay. Let's, everyone has one. It's or nearly everyone. Amazing. Okay. Excellent. Well, we knew this was a more educated group as far as cybersecurity goes and cyber insurance goes. So that's not surprising. Let's jump in. I think some of the elements we're going to talk about could be helpful, even if you have one, as to what to do to get the cost on it more under control and make sure that you've got all your gaps covered. So a quick intro on our business. We are a agency. We operate nationwide, and neither myself nor my co-founder started out life in the insurance business. We operated technology companies and data companies before. And so we've been in the seat of buying insurance for a business like many of you have. And that's the perspective we take. And we started this business because we wanted to take that buying process, which we found to be painful, and make it better. And the idea of, hey, here's a PDF document that's 30 pages long. Please fill it out and send it back to me, and then I'll come back to you with a quote, we think is just the wrong way to sell an insurance product. So we've partnered with Integris, and we look for partners who can bring data and capabilities to reduce the risk to the company that's trying to buy insurance and reduce the risk for the carrier. And that allows us to offer a better price and a better product to the carrier, because they know that Integris is helping protect you, and you've got the right cybersecurity measures in place. And because I spent over a decade in technology before getting into insurance, we understand this product and these risks a lot better than most folks that you're going to talk to. So that's just a little bit of background to understand where we come from. Let's go to the next slide here. So I think a key thing to keep in mind here is that I hear from many organizations, small and medium-sized organizations, this perspective of, well, we're too small. Why would anyone want to attack us? They're going to attack, Delta or Experian or someone very large. And the stats just do not bear that up. You are 3 times more likely to be targeted by a cyber attack if you're a small or medium-sized organization. And in fact, 3 out of 4 ransomware attacks hit companies with less than 50 million of revenue, and over half hit companies with less than 100 employees. And I would presume that, and based on the stats that we got in the comments here, today. That covers a fair portion of folks on the call. So the idea of believing that you're safe, it's not a problem you need to worry about, is going to be one that's not going to bear out. It certainly doesn't bear out facts. So you definitely want to kind of think about cybersecurity for your business if you haven't already put all the measures in place and you want to keep it top of mind. Let's go to the next slide. So when you do get hit with attack, there are a couple of different cost areas, and we'll talk more in depth in a moment about where insurance fits in that, but a couple of costs and risks to think about. The one that most people think about is the actual money that you're paying out to get the repair done, to get things back in order, back the way they were. And those costs are certainly large. We see, nearly $500,000 for a ransomware cost, oftentimes for small businesses. But I think the one that people don't think about is the cost to your reputation as a business. I think if a week ago I had mentioned the word CrowdStrike, I would presume that many people on the call, outside of Integris perhaps, would say, I don't know what that is. And yet, if you say it today, if you pull up the headlines on the news of the past week, everyone's hearing about it, and it's not positive. So that's a reputational hit that CrowdStrike is taking. And many businesses that leverage software or were connected to software that leveraged CrowdStrike took a hit there. And what studies have shown is that over half of your customers have said, if you have a data breach, I'm probably going to leave, or at least look at moving and in working with someone else. So this does affect your customer base in that they're going to think about you differently. They're going to trust you differently than before.
Yeah, Paul, I'll add a couple things here. Number one was Michael has a great question, is what is the vector of such attacks? And my answer to that question, at least just from my perspective, is it still is email. Email's the number one threat vector that we've seen, and then they deploy the play, I call them plays, of, hey, funds transfer is a play that they're trying to get you to do. The other play is I'm going to deploy ransomware via you doing something. So I still say that email is the number one threat vector, and then they're using that vector to execute on different plays.
Yes, no, that definitely bears out, and in our not just in the data, but even in our conversations with company leaders, we see over and over that when they've had an issue, they often say, so-and-so clicked on an email they shouldn't have, or we just about did a funds transfer because of an email. And so it really just does come up over and over again. Very, very brief.
And I'm sure the virtual world that we all now live in doesn't help this at all, right?
No.
When I used to be able to walk next door and say, hey, you really need that 50 grand wired today, is completely different now than everyone's on calls all day long or sending a ton of email. And there's just that one less step there. The final one I'm going to touch on here is this bottom box that Paul has put on here of 60% of small businesses shut down within 6 months. Paul and I talk a lot about the reputational hit that organizations face when they go through this, and it's very hard to quantify what that impact actually is. So what I utilize to hopefully get this point across is the Experian data breach from a few years ago. I believe they were a $5 billion market cap when they got hit, and they lost $1 billion of market cap within 1 week of getting hit or going public with that event. What I hate about this example is I'm talking about billions. What I like about this example is I can quickly change that into a percentage, which is 20% of a hit over 1 week's time. So what I then say is, hey, who cares what size business you are? As Paul articulated on the other slides, is a lot of businesses that are really seeing this that we don't see in the news are the small and medium-sized businesses. If we're to take that 20% percentage and apply it to your top line revenue or to your profit, however you want to look at it, could you survive that? would that be a lasting thing? What would you need to do to be able to recoup that 20% hit that you then took on your reputation?
Mhm. Great point. Great point. And I think the other element besides that, that uh, hit of revenue is we're still talking about that years later, right? And we certainly, when we think about who we want to give our data to, we think about that company. I think oftentimes, at least I certainly do, and do I trust them with my data? Um, I think that the key element that oftentimes people have a misperception about cybersecurity and how it plays out as a risk is, well, we've got this software in place. An internal team put it in place, or an MSP partner put it in place. We're all set. And I see so many companies that have all the right boxes checked for security measures in terms of process and software, but they have one that we ask them the question, what do you have in place as far as educating your staff? And that human element is just not on the radar. The idea of software protecting everything and staff being able to do whatever or not think is a real problem. 3 out of 4 breaches involve a human element, whether it's that clicking on the email that you talked about, Anthony, or um, someone researching you, or someone on your accounting team online, finding out some key elements, where you went to college, maybe the name of your pet because you put it on Facebook, and then engineering based on that, what they've learned about you, how to log into your accounting system, et cetera. And the other element to keep in mind, besides this human element, is your supply chain. So you might do everything right, but how does your supply chain fit into your cybersecurity? Almost 2/3 of incidents involve a supply chain partner. So in the case of CrowdStrike, we'll just keep beating that dead horse. Many people who were hampered weren't using CrowdStrike directly, but they were using software or a partner that they relied on that used CrowdStrike. And so that's how you can get hit. Even if you feel like I'm doing everything I can, you want to be thoughtful about who you're connecting to and who you're relying on. And there's some things we'll talk about in a moment that can you at least want to think about and keep in your thought process here.
Michael asked another question that was a little bit earlier in the presentation, so it may have been about around business disaster recovery, business continuity, disaster recovery. It was, what about between on-prem versus SaaS applications? So we're just speaking specifically, Michael, if you were talking about BCDR, we like to say, and SaaS is, we like to say the cloud is not heaven at Integris. A lot of people come to us and they say, like, I moved it to the cloud. And then you come to find out, you'll ask questions on Microsoft 365 as well as Google, doesn't matter which one, they'll come to find out like, oh, they don't actually back up my data. They promise me uptime. That's what I'm buying from them. They're not promising or doing anything on that world. So a lot of organizations get caught with surprise. In the SaaS world, I would tell you the same thing. And Paul was just kind of touching on this, is if you are relying on a SaaS application, you need to understand the implications if that application is to go down, right? If they had CrowdStrike and they were down and now you can't generate revenue, what does that mean to you? And Paul, as he mentioned, is going to touch on some of the coverages that are out there that with a really good broker or agent, you will be able to understand and craft to your business. But for SaaS specifically, Michael, that's what I would say is, go into it with, yes, it's a great tool. We use a ton of SaaS. But how does that impact your business if they are to go down versus on-prem? You actually have full control of, right? You are going to back it up. You are going to be able to form the box that it is secured in. So there's some control that is lost when going to SaaS. Not to poo-poo SaaS, like SaaS is very good. You just want to be thinking about some of these additional things.
Yeah, and I think I think about it from the perspective of what security am I putting in place regardless of the source of the software, right, or the file. So if you have a SaaS provider, and do they offer multi-factor authentication, and did you turn it on? If you're doing it, on-prem, what security measures are in place? So I think a key question here that I run into often is, well, we've got all these measures in place. We've invested all this money, internally, or we have a great partner like Integris that's helping protect us. Why do I need cyber insurance? Isn't that just belt and suspenders? That seems like a overkill. And I would sort of flip it around and ask the question, do you have insurance for fire? I have yet to meet a business owner that does not have fire coverage. And yet you probably have smoke alarms, et cetera. Down the street is a fire department. And yet you're concerned about that. But your chance of a cyber attack, if you're a small or medium-sized organization, is 6.5 times more than your chance of experiencing a fire. So putting in place these measures is sort of table stakes, like putting in a smoke detector. But if you were to suffer some of these harms that we talked about earlier from a cyber attack, what would that do to your business? And do you want to put in some protection there? That's I think a key element to sort of keep in mind is you've got a human element. So even if you have all the right measures in place, you do have humans that work for you and humans at any partners that you have, and things happen because of that. So let's move to the next slide here and start moving towards, so what can you do about it? So this need for cyber insurance, not just cybersecurity, is getting larger. Certainly, most businesses have some portion of their staff that works from home or works remote in some way, shape, or form. More businesses have software in place than in the past, and that creates additional risk. And you've got supply chain partners, whether it's vendors that are connecting with you or your customers that you're connected with, that all provide risk points. And then most companies, certainly ones that are selling to large customers or working with the government, have actual contractual commitments to have cyber insurance. It's very, very common in a contract today with a customer that's of any size to see a call out, you need X dollars in cyber insurance coverage. And so you've got that need for cyber insurance that's being put upon you by your value chain. And the criminals are just getting better, right? That's a fundamental risk that we face, is they are not resting, they're not on vacation. So because of that, you need to get cyber insurance and make sure it meets your needs. So let's switch now to the next page, and let's talk about what some things that you can do to bring down the cost of cyber insurance, and also to protect your organization and make sure you're getting the right protections in place. So the first one is people. Do you have training in place for your staff? Do you have processes in place for your staff? So we sometimes see that there is a procedure that is in place. Whenever we're going to do a funds transfer, this has to happen, X, Y, Z. But companies don't necessarily write it down. And as you grow a business, the new staff that you're bringing in, the people that are shifting departments, sometimes don't get educated on the process. So make sure you're writing down your processes. Make sure you're thinking about your processes. If someone received an email that looks like it came from me, what are they supposed to do? Just act on it? Or should they do a confirmation on the phone or face-to-face? And so some of these elements of training the staff of what to look for and what to do and putting that in place is really critical. Do you allow USB drives on your systems? That's a risk point. Things can be introduced and data can be taken out. And what do you do as far as multi-factor authentication? It does take more time to log in with MFA, and we hear a lot, well, we have it in place for everyone, but the CEO doesn't want it. They want it to be the exception. That's probably where you're going to see a attack come from, and the vector come from. And who wants to have that conversation? Hey, you're the reason we got hit, boss. So think about some of these things, and think about mobile protection. Most organizations I talk to, the employees walk around with certainly company email, but often data. And a lot of those things you can put in place without necessarily spending more money. You say, from now on, we are going to do this, and this needs to happen when we do this. And then some are going to be an investment, right? Just like changing out the batteries on the smoke detector. So those are some things that you should be thinking about and considering. And let's talk briefly about buying cyber insurance. When you're looking for coverage, make sure that you are looking at the actual coverage. The document's not fun to read, but those details matter. We see some that don't cover any type of media event that happens. If someone sues you because of something that was published by the company. And yet, if the company's doing social media and press releases, advertising, there's a strong risk of that. And so you want to make sure that is covered in the policy that you get. And many policies don't cover that. You want to also look at the definitions, what people define as a element that the carrier is going to cover. So those are some things to think about. Let's move on, because we're running short of time here. And I want to make sure you have an idea of a couple of things that can be helpful to you when you actually get your policy. So many people are aware of these apps that some carriers are using for auto insurance that can lower your rates because they watch and see that you're a safe driver. And we have a product like that we've developed with a partner that takes into account, if you've got all these security measures in place and you're a lower risk business or organization, then you actually get rates 30 to 50% lower than if you just call a random agency and buy a cyber policy. So for those who are doing all the right things and have a low risk profile, we have that. And then we can also, for those who maybe haven't made all those cybersecurity investments or are in a higher risk area, we can provide you with a off-the-shelf cyber policy from dozens of different cyber carriers. So there's no reason that a company couldn't get cyber insurance, no matter what their situation is. The price is just going to depend on the investment that you made in protecting yourself. Let's go to the next one. So this is an example of actually one of Integris clients in the Mid-Atlantic area. They were a $6 million revenue services company. Their cyber policy that was coming up for renewal was around $4,000, and we were able to get them a off-the-shelf policy quote similar to what they had for about $4,000, and then we also were able to get them a quote of a coverage that was actually a better fit for their organization through this program that we run with Integris. And they were able to save $1,800. In their case, that was 48% savings off of what they had in place previously. And they weren't, giving up coverage that they needed or anything like that. They were actually getting better protection. So better coverage doesn't necessarily mean higher price if you're making the right decisions, as Anthony talked about with the architecture. So I think we'll go ahead and stop there so we can spend a couple of minutes handling questions. So let's just jump over to the comments and questions here.
Yeah, we got one here is from Michael, another one from Michael. Michael, thank you so much for, I already thanked you in the chat, but I'm thanking you again for third question. With limited budgets, we needed to know where to spend for the most benefit. And I couldn't agree more with that. We see all organizations, all different sizes, all different types of budgets. Some that'll surprise you too. I have worked with churches with 5 employees that I didn't think would have more than $5,000 to potentially put to this, and they've written a check for $50,000. I've worked with large organizations, commercial real estate investment trusts, and things like that, that I thought could spend some money on this stuff, and they budgeted almost nothing for it. So you're 100% correct. And to me, that's what's really exciting about the responsible IT architecture framework is it gives you somewhere to start, right? And what I like to tell for people is you define the budget that you have. First off is education, right? Like what we're doing today and you guys have come to see today, that needs to happen across the entire organization or at minimum the executive leadership team to fully understand like what are the threats of 2024 and how can we proactively get after it. With that being said, what can we set aside for budget? And then how would I deploy that budget in a systematic manner to get the most bang for my buck per se? And part of that's got to be insurance, right? Like we do everything we can do to protect organizations from ever needing to use the insurance. But Paul said in his presentation, it's humans and technology. And some may say we'll always have jobs. But I like to say it's never going to be perfect. Issues will always occur. So how do we prevent those? And I came from the cyber insurance space. And, I still to this day recommend strategic approach. Piece of your budget should be cyber insurance. Piece of it should be tools properly implemented. And piece of it should go into policies and what's coming and, proactive process measures that you can take to protect yourself. So then you take that roadmap and you just start to knock them off. And you may not be able to do everything on day one. That's okay. I think Paul would even tell you the insurance carriers love to see a plan, right? Here's what we've done. We know what we need to do next, and here's our plan to get there. Paul, I don't know if you want to give that one a crack.
I think that's true. And I think what I talked about a few minutes ago were several specifics that you can do that don't actually cost any money. So having a written policy that says anytime you receive an email or text message saying, please change where our payment goes from one of your vendors, what is your policy and procedure to deal with that? That's not a spend on insurance or software or services. That is here is what we will do. Write it down in a Word document. Make sure everyone knows who has the ability to change that information or send funds out. And you've already lowered the cost of your cyber insurance. And more importantly than that, you've lowered the risk that funds are going to go out that shouldn't or go to the wrong place.
Awesome. With that, we are on time. So I will end today's session. Francesca shared in the chat our feedback form. Please take some time so we can get better and improve our presentations in the future. Paul, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And everybody, thanks for attending. And special shout out again to Michael for asking all these questions on today's presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Hope it was helpful.